What's good? I wanted to talk about something I've always been interested in, and that's the different processes that creatives use when creating their work. Unfortunately, this is not a common thing for people to share, especially in the music industry. But today you're in luck because I'm going to be showing you my process, actually my entire process for shooting concerts and shows. I'm going to be giving you a very high level breakdown. So hopefully, even if you're an experienced concert shooter, you can take something away from this video. I broke my process up into 3 parts. Part 1 is pre-production. Part 2 is production, or my process for shooting the show itself. This includes what I call the rule of 3s, which I'll explain later. And then part 3 is my process for after a show. If you're as serious about this career as I am, definitely get your notepad out for this one because we're about to dive in. So let's start with part 1, pre-production. Either the night before or the day of the event, I'll make sure that all of my camera batteries, gimbal batteries, microphone batteries, or any other batteries that I plan on using are fully charged. I'll also go through all of my gear and make sure things like my camera's sensor and lenses are clean and free of dust and smudges. An important part of preparing for a show is identifying deliverables. Deliverables, simply put, are the finished assets that you create from that show. I'll either be shooting for myself because I have a media pass, or I'll be shooting for a client. This could be an artist, a venue, or a festival. If I'm shooting for myself, then I get to decide what assets I'll create. Do I want to shoot video, photo, or both? Usually if I'm there for a client, then they have specific deliverables that they want from that show. This is the case for me 99% of the time. So usually through email, I'll ask a number of questions to figure out exactly what they want. I've been asked to deliver recap videos, raw clips, photos, vlogs, VFX edits, and even super vaguely cool moments. Additional questions I'll ask are, what format or formats do you want the content to be in? Where will this content live? Or like, where will it be posted? This informs me how I need to shoot and edit the content. If I'm doing video, I'll ask ahead of time to see if they have an approved song that they would like me to use for the edit. Another very important question I'll ask is when they need that content to be delivered. I've ran into situations where the client and I didn't completely understand each other, and that led to some very uncomfortable conversations. If you're unsure about something, just ask again. Better safe than sorry. The next thing that I look at getting figured out prior to a show is credentials. You'll always need some sort of band, sticker, or tag to get access to the pit and other restricted areas of the event. I always speak to my point of contact ahead of time to make sure they know that I will need credentials upon arrival. Another thing I've tried to do since the beginning is arrive to the venue early. There's several things that I need to figure out, but the biggest reason is it helps me get my nerves under control before the show starts. There's many reasons for having nerves, whether it's your first show or you've been doing this for years, but this isn't a bad thing. The way I look at it is, if you're nervous, it just means you care. Like I mentioned, there's some things we need to figure out prior to the start of the show. One of those things is what restrictions I have based off the credentials I've been given. I like to talk to my point of contact about what areas I have access to, and if possible, I try to speak with the manager of the artist or band and ask about things like stage access and how many songs I'm allowed to shoot. All my advanced shooters out there know about these next questions. If I am able to speak with the manager, I'll always ask if there are any planned moments in the set. For example, are there any specific songs they want covered? Will there be any pyro, fireworks, or confetti? Or is there any special guests that I need to be aware of? If there are any moments like this, these types of shots will make up the majority of the content that you want to capture because they're more interesting and engaging than the usual performance shots that we all expect to see. Okay, one last thing that I do right before the show starts is I walk through the entire venue so that I know the fastest ways to get around and the angles that I'm working with. Live events are very fast-paced and key moments will come without any warning, so knowing how to get around is very important. I like to introduce myself to the stage manager and the security guards as well because they will be super helpful in stressful situations if they already know who you are and what you're doing. All right, let's dive into part 2, shooting the show itself. As the show is starting, my number 1 priority is to cover my bases. What does this mean? Essentially, concerts are often unpredictable because an artist might end early, technical issues, weather, and other things outside of our control. So to guarantee that I have all the covers that I need, I cover my bases by getting as many different angles and looks as possible within those first 3 songs. This leads us to a 3x3 list that I call the rule of 3s. 3 points of focus that each have 3 components. The first point of focus is getting close, medium, and wide shots. So regardless of subject matter, having a wide variety of focal lengths will give your videos and photos a very diverse amount of looks. So an example would be getting all of my close-up and medium shots during those first 3 songs, and then afterwards going to the back of the crowd to get all of my wide and super wide shots. The second point of focus now has to do with subject matter. A common mistake that I see is shooters tend to focus solely on the performance aspects of the show and forget about the other things that make up the whole experience. To avoid this, I will always grab shots of the artist, the crowd, and details that are specific to that event. In my mind, I'm trying to recreate that experience for whoever sees that video or photo. Including details like signage, lighting, hands in the air, and different parts of the set design will be that cherry on top to all the great performance shots that I get. Okay, the last point of focus in my rule of threes is the rule of thirds. I'm sure you've heard about this, but I wanted to touch on it quick just because it is a really important part of my process. Essentially, it's breaking up your image into 9 equal parts and placing the main subject along one of those intersecting lines. Following this rule will generally lead to very pleasing images, although it quite literally is a science. At the end of the day, I'm always looking to create compositions that tell a story. So I try to do this by putting my main subject on 1/3 and then a secondary subject or background on another. Doing this not only creates depth, but it ties together how different subjects and backgrounds are all part of like one experience. Yeah, I'm a nerd about this, okay guys? So just let it be. But yeah, those are the 3 main points of focus I have in mind when I shoot any concert or show. If I get any combination of those things, then I know I have all the pieces to create balanced and highly engaging content for myself or for my client. We've done it, we've shot the show. Now moving on to part 3, my post-production process. I speed home, I whip open the door.
What's wrong?
And get straight to editing as fast as humanly possible.
Holy
Mostly joking, but I do need to import my cards and I like to make a backup straight away. The speed with which I go through this entire post-production process has everything to do with the deadlines that the client and I established ahead of time. Generally speaking, the faster the turnaround time, the better. But once I have everything imported and backed up, I'll either go straight to bed or I'll begin by editing whatever content the client needs the fastest. In my experience, this is usually photos and raw clips if they requested that type of content. If I'm creating an edit, I'll begin by bringing all of my footage into the editing software and I'll begin by cutting and organizing selects. Selects are all of the best moments from the clips that I shot so that I don't have to sort through anything that I wouldn't use in the edit. Another great thing about selects is knowing where particular shots are when I need them. I probably over-organize my footage, which is okay if I'm not on a super tight deadline because it does add a bit of extra time. If I am on a super tight deadline or if I'm live editing, which I'll cover in another video, I'll just create a string out of all the clips and scrub through the footage to find specific shots as I'm editing. The next thing that I do is I cut and prep the audio to fit the length of the video I'm trying to make. A lot of times I'll also add markers to spots in the audio that I know I want to cut on, or if I have a specific idea for a specific section. From there, I dive into the editing. I feel very strongly that this is a part of the creative process that you have to make your own. No one sees what you see or has the vision or the rhythm that you do. Finding your voice and your style is what editing is all about, in my opinion. So once I have the edit in what I believe to be the final state, I'll label it V1 and send it off to the client for notes and approval. Once all the changes have been made and the final version is approved, I then convert that video to all the different formats that the client needs, if it isn't already formatted, obviously. I also want to touch quickly on the different tools that you can use to get assets to your clients. So in my experience, Dropbox seems to be the industry standard, so that's what I would recommend, but other options that work perfectly fine are WeTransfer and Google Drive. Now you might be thinking, okay, cool, this is all great, but I would approach shooting shows and concerts very differently. And to be honest, I would hope that you do. Because the goal here isn't to give you this perfect process that makes any sort of guarantees. Instead, it's giving you an inside look into the way that I go about it, and then you can pick and choose a couple of those things to implement into your own process. If you found any amount of value in this, please consider liking this video and even subscribing. I'm trying to pass Nikon as subscribers because, well, potatoes. If you have any questions, comments, or topics that you'd like me to cover, please leave them below. Wrk to create, Wrk to inspire, and I hope to see you